Welcome to everybody who's joining us, who's rejoining or joining new. I think most everybody's, the biggest part of you were in the last session at least. So welcome back to our fourth session. We'll get underway in just a few minutes. Kenny, how do you say your last name?
Ciao.
Chow. Okay. Good to know. Thanks. Welcome. Those of you who just joined, we'll start at the top of the hour. So just a few minutes. I've been saying in some of the last sessions, it's great to have this reconnection with people, right? A lot of these people I know, so it's nice to see familiar faces. We all miss the travel and being able to have drinks or dinner or something and connecting in person, but this is the next best thing. Thank goodness we have this, right? Welcome back. I see Damon Diener on there. Welcome, Damon.
Good morning.
How is it in San Diego?
It's good, thanks. It's finally dry and warm, back to normal.
That's good. Getting some daylight out there.
Yeah, for sure. Good sessions this morning, by the way.
Aren't they great speakers? You know, this is the fun thing. It's almost like I get to design my own learning program and then invite a bunch of friends to come along.
You're absolutely right. It's what it feels like.
All right, we've got about 2 minutes here and we'll get underway. Grab a cup of something that keeps you energized, get comfortable. Got one more hour. All right, well, welcome back, everybody. Let's see here. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. I need to check something. Okay. All right. So, welcome to everybody who's joining us. I appreciate everybody who's been with us all afternoon, all morning, depending on where you are. And we're about to start our last session. And I'm very excited to have Kenny on with us. Kenny comes to us from LinkedIn. And let me just get to your intro here. So Kenny's over customer experience. He's been working with business strategy, operating model design, and transformation. He also is over customer experience, talent, and learning at LinkedIn, based out of New York. Kenny, you lived in Shanghai. You're from another place in China, though, right?
Yeah, sorry, I'm on mute. Yes, I grew up in Nanjing, which is about 300 kilometers away from Shanghai. I had my undergrads and work in Shanghai pretty intensively.
Yeah, Nanjing is like, well, every other Chinese city, growing so fast. I've been there a few times for work. But we're very happy to have Kenny on today, and we're going to talk a little bit about what are some things that he's been doing? What does his team do? What are some of what's their mission and purpose? What are some of how do they think about customer experience? What's changed, et cetera? So let's go ahead and get underway. I'll keep admitting people and let Kenny talk. So go ahead and introduce yourself and the work you do, Kenny.
Yeah, yeah, I'm Kenny. I'm on the global customer experience team of LinkedIn, and as Elliot just shared, I've been working in the customer experience areas for quite a while, and half of the time actually serving clients directly at HSBC and McKinsey, and now I'm LinkedIn more serve from behind the scene of thinking about how do we improve customer experience holistically for LinkedIn. And before I kind of introduce more about the team and kind of customer experience with LinkedIn, I also want to give a little bit introduction of LinkedIn itself. I guess as most people are familiar with LinkedIn, basically LinkedIn.com, that's the platform everyone is familiar with and using. But LinkedIn actually has like multiple line of business, and the platform that you've seen and you're using is only part of it. So I'll say at the higher level, LinkedIn has a 2C business and there's a 2B business. So 2C are basically everyone using the LinkedIn.com, the professional social network, plus like if you want to find a job, you're looking for roles and you apply there and things like that. So that's kind of the 2C side. And then if you are willing to subscribe to premium, then you get additional features and insights. There's a 2B side, which kind of we say there are three kind of big line of business. One is the talent solution, which now include talent acquisition, learning, and Glint. So Glint is our arms on employee engagement. And then the second piece is the marketing solution, which basically handle all the advertising on the platform. And the third piece is LinkedIn Sales Solution. The flagship product is the Sales Navigator that helps sales professionals to build network and connecting their relationships. So I think this is just a high level of the organization that can help give some context of the things that we've done with LinkedIn. And the customer experience team with LinkedIn itself is relatively new. We've been there for 5-6 years, and we grow from a line of business team to a more foundational team that's serving all line of business at the organization. And our mission is to basically bring together the collective expertise and power of LinkedIn to create guided, frictionless, and valuable experience for all members and customers. So there are a few unique things about this team. One is we kind of serve both members and customers, so both the 2C side and the 2B side. And especially interesting thing on LinkedIn is one person can be a customer and can be a member at the same time. So you can be a recruiter on the LinkedIn and using LinkedIn to find your candidates. At the same time, you can be a learner on LinkedIn Learning. So the kind of the combo persona of a certain customers is very interesting to think about when you want to make sure the experience is consistent, smooth, and seamless across the different experience that they have. The second unique piece is that we think about customers, about their whole life cycle. And we also think about their experience in a holistic manner. So if we compare the team with other teams or functions of the team, a lot of time, like if you think about a marketing team, they think about a certain life cycle, a certain period of the customer life cycle. And they also think about a few certain touch points with the customers. But our team think about like the holistic experience, the end-to-end experience that covers the whole life cycle of the customer. The third thing is we are the team that's kind of thinking about how do we break the silos within the organization. Is you think about customer experience, it is very cross-functional effort. it requires collaboration across all the different functions that we have: marketing, sales, product, right, operations, customer support. So it's really a cross-functional effort that we're talking about here. So my team is very much focused on how do we break the silos and then help bring everyone together to serve the customer better. Elliot, you're on mute.
I am. There's a little bit of background noise here. So tell me a little bit about how you put your team together and what kinds of skill sets or different backgrounds sit in your team.
Yeah, so so my team is actually a very diverse set of group. So we have people who actually kind of professional customer experience background, like myself and a few other folks. We also have people who actually come in directly from frontline. So they work with customers at LinkedIn or other organizations. So they work, they support the customer, they service the customer. So they bring the knowledge of the day-to-day interactions and the empathy with the customers and all that fun stuff. And then we also have people who have, other quote unquote non-traditional background from like media or from, other tech companies. So it's a mix of backgrounds of people. I think the idea is we want to have a unique perspectives from all those different individuals to think about, because we are serving customers with diverse background and experiences, and we want to relate to them. So we're trying to figure out like what are the best kind of combination of talent within the team. But then in terms of skill sets, we're typically thinking about a couple of things. One is problem solving. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like something that every role now today requires. And then two is passionate about the customer. This is like a requirement for the team, because a lot of time we are evangelized for the customer. And sometimes it is not 100% aligned with the business, because there's sometimes you need to balance different interests. You need to think about the trade-offs, but you really need to have that passion and interest for the customer, so that you can stand behind them. You can think from their perspective and really promote the interests of the customer. And then there's also all the cross-functional collaboration piece, all the communication skills, and all those fun stuff. But as in summary, I think it's a very diverse set of group.
Great. And can you share an example of how you empathize with customers? How do you learn about pain points, moments that matter? What are some examples that you can share?
Yeah, of course. So there's actually an interesting story that I've been working on for the past few years. So the story is from our marketing solution business, and as I mentioned, this is the business where we handle all the advertising on the platform. And the platform grows like very well, and we attract a lot of new marketers onto the platform. But the challenges is probably the similar challenge with many of the other platform is retention. Right? How do we attract all those customers onto the platform at the same time we can retain them? And we're facing similar challenges, is like we are not doing a good job of retaining our customer. So the challenge is how do we solve that? As a technology company, a lot of time is driven by our product. The experience is driven by the product, and a lot of decisions is driven by the product. So the natural thinking is we need to improve our product to help maintain and retain our customers. But when we look into the whole situation, we talk to the customers, we do customer research, we're really trying to look at the data, really understand like why customer actually drop off and where actually customer drop off. And we realized a couple of things and kind of the insights we use to navigate our solutioning. One is when we think about advertising on LinkedIn platform, many of the marketers are not starting doing marketing on LinkedIn. they actually starting with Google and Facebook and other more dominating platform. So they have a certain habit and way of using the platform based on their experience with Google and Facebook. So they basically bring those experience and bring those best practices onto LinkedIn. But what unique about LinkedIn is the marketing platform on LinkedIn is different from Google and Facebook. It requires a different way of thinking about how do you build the brand, how do you get the followers, how do you gain attractions on the platform. So those customers with preset perceptions and adopting their previous best practices actually are not, sometimes they're not get the most value out of the platform. So that's the one thing that we kind of noticed in the process. So we're thinking about how do we better educate the customers and how can we change their mindset and behavior from what they're really already familiar with onto the new platform. So that's the first piece. The second piece is we also think we always talk about, like, you know, as a technology company, we think about product, and the product experience is really critical. But from our conversation and customer research, we noticed that people actually want to talk to people. It's not just about product itself. It's about the combination of product experience, but also at certain point of time, in certain moments, they actually want to talk to a person that can help them accelerate their learning, accelerate their journey with the platform. So think about, like, say a marketer comes to the platform, they have a question. There's one way they can go to the help center. They can, you know, do Google research and trying to figure out the answer themselves. But the most ideal approach for them is, like, I can just have some person to ask, and who is a professional on the platform who can share all those experience and best practices at the same time. So combining those two insights, one is we need better education. We need help transform the perception of those customers. And two is customer want to have human interactions, and some, especially in some moments, they actually prefer human interactions. Combining those insights, we actually decided that we should introduce human into the whole onboarding process, on top of what we're going to improve on products. So we set up a new service model. We established a new team in Detroit, starting with 5 people, just to as a pilot to serve all the North America new customers. And then we run the programs for almost a year. And then we just very quickly, we noticed the improvements both on the customer side in terms of experience, in terms of their success on the platform, in terms of value that they get, and also on the financial end on our side in terms of retention, in terms of the revenue and everything. That we see a significant increase from before. So now we are basically expanding that service model globally. We're setting up the team across the globe, and we're growing the team to, you know, almost 30 people by the end of the fiscal year. So I think that's a kind of a story. I'll say the few things I'll highlight. One is really to challenge the status quo. There's a traditional thinking of what things should be done, but really challenge that and see whether there's an alternative or other solutions that can help solve the issue. Two is really anchor on customer, because without those customer insights, we'll not be able to convince the organization that we need to do something different. And understand customer deeply, understand their needs and pain points deeply, will help build the case to change or do something new or do something different.
Okay. Could you tell us a little bit about what's changed as a result of COVID, or what's been accelerated? When we talked a few weeks ago, you were talking about some really interesting things that you've learned. What have you seen?
Yeah, so so it's actually pretty amazing to look at the whole thing unfold over the past year, right? So starting from last March, that's where things like all locked down, people start to work from home, and that's the where all the challenges start to begin in the kind of talent acquisition world, because all the recruiting now out of sudden need to switch to online. And the whole process in talent acquisition is centered around like the panel interview, the in-person interactions, and all things just gone overnight. And then so every organization is scrambled around to figure out how do we move the hiring process into to online. What are the best practices? What are the processes even to run the whole recruiting virtually? So the unique thing about LinkedIn is we're able to bring customers together to actually talk about and discuss some of the past practices and learnings, and even among competitors. So we actually did a lot of sessions to bring companies together to talk about how to actually do hiring virtually. So that's one, the switching from kind of in-person interviews to virtually, which is unsurprising. The second thing is around employee wellness. There's definitely a very much increase in the attention of employee awareness. And then the change there is especially around, because we're not meeting people in person, and the managers and the leadership now losing the capability of that water cooler conversation of checking up and understand the health of the team and the health of the organization. So all the companies are trying to find new ways to have that understanding of employee awareness. And the biggest tool that kind of surged is employee survey. And we noticed that the number of employee survey just go over the roof. Originally, it was around 3 times a year on average. In the pandemic, it increased to 7 times per year on average. So it's more than doubled in terms of employee survey. And then the response on the surveys also increased, because people are now starting to more engage into the process, and they want to have a channel to voice their concerns, their questions, their feelings, and all that. For example, one of the healthcare clients that we have, they launched customer survey right after the pandemic, and that's basically healthcare system is the first one that hit, right? So they asked their frontline nurses and doctors about how they're doing and everything. 2 things come out of it. One is the frontline people are really appreciate that they're being asked. That sense of like being asked, being taken care of is really important. That drive a lot of engagement there. The second thing is the results from that survey actually drive a lot of changes from the frontline. One of the things that the frontline mentioned is lack of personal protection equipment. And that feedback immediately gets back to the leadership, and those equipments were ready on the site in 2 days. So you can see a lot of those virtuous cycle happening by going through all those employee surveys with the companies and all that. The other thing that we also interesting to notice is some of the drivers we're talking about for employee engagement. Historically, career has always been on the top of the driver list. So as long as people feel that they have a career with the companies, they feel engaged, they feel happy, they feel valued. Within pandemic, another driver quickly catch up, which is sense of belonging. So the importance of the people feeling that they belong to the organization, the feeling that they have the voice in the organization, they feel that they're being heard, they feel that their opinion being valued and being actioned upon, that now is actually catching up really quickly and kind of neck to neck with career. And then that is for existing employee. On top of that, we also see that this becomes a top criteria for potential and for prospect employee. So it's very natural when you think about if you want to find a new company to join, you would ask actually, hey, what's the policy or how things are going with the company during the pandemic? Because all those cultural and engagement changes within the company now become part of the employee brand. And then all the candidates want to understand what the company has done. Do they actually put employee first? What are the policies have been put in place to help employees be successful? So that's another change we see in terms of the engagement, employee engagement drivers. And then there are other things. Then I think we can also talk more. But if there's any other topics we want to cover, we can also talk about that.
Sure, and I want to invite everybody on the call here to also post their questions in the chat as well. What are some things that you see in terms of how companies think about talent, or maybe LinkedIn thinks about talent? What's changed there?
Yeah, so I think a big change we've seen is the thinking about where do we get talent. Because historically the location of the company is the biggest determination of where do you want to find the talent pool, right? So if you have an office in New York, you have an office in San Francisco, yes, those are where you're trying to find the talent. But now, given everything is shifting to remote, it basically opened up the whole geographic for talent pipeline. And so we definitely see a lot of trend in terms of the when the talent acquisition folks come into the platform, they're opening up in terms of geographic and locations to source their pipeline. And interesting, that's also a great opportunity for some of the cities. For example, Detroit, Omaha, right? Those cities also start to think about how to leverage and piggyback on this trend and really kind of build a talent pool for those companies, remote companies. And you've seen like a lot of those thinking getting to the city and governments start to think about how to attract talent and then build those cities in terms of like remoting workers for some of the companies. So I think that's actually a very interesting way to look at talent pool and talent pipeline. And the other piece is about, I think it's interesting combining with this factors is even more powerful, is around upskill. So we traditionally, there's a way of thinking is called skill adjacency, right? People think about upskill is like you upskill from a skill that is adjacent to another, so you can kind of do more of a linear progression of the skill sets. But we notice from our data is it may not be true all the time, which means people are moving into certain professionals without previous experience in that area. So for example, what we notice from the data is in the areas of data science and artificial intelligence, those roles are actually a lot of those roles are actually coming from unrelated industries. It's about half of those people who are actually coming from unrelated industries. And that number jumps even higher when we look at engineering roles, which is 67%. We look at content roles, which is 72%, and sales, which is 75%. So all those numbers basically show that the what we call skill adjacency may not be always true. In some situations, people actually can do those leap jump into a role that is less connected to their current role. So if you combine those two pieces, like the upskills of from a non-adjacent skill sets to the remote nature of talent pool, that is really powerful. That you can basically open up your talent pipeline significantly from before. And that is kind of the whole, a lot of those trends we've seen in the industry is those two factors are driving some of the talent flow, even within different geographies.
And is it your sense that companies have made that shift to thinking about talent that way in the last year to where they're doing? I know one of the people on the call, Sena from Koç in Istanbul, we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, that she's in Istanbul and they're the largest employer in that market. but now you've got Amazon in Moscow who's also recruiting in Istanbul. So it's really opening up these barriers that used to be there in terms of recruiting people in a certain geography have really gone away.
Yeah, so that's true, but I think two thoughts there. One is it's a journey, right? It's not happen overnight to say, hey, now every companies now can hire people from different geographies. Some companies going faster, some companies go slower. Amazon is probably the kind of one of the four companies running in the leading positions, but not all companies are doing that, right? So I think it's a journey that a lot of companies are going to be embarked to think about how they compete talent in this new environment. The other thing I think is it is also very much industry dependent.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the industries are more capable or more suited for this type of hiring, remote hiring, right? A lot of those like office job or even some of the engineering job can be sourced that way. But there are jobs that you're not able to source remotely. For example, healthcare. Right? For example, a lot of the service industries you can't source remotely, so you have to stay local. So I think like there are different factors, and it very much company dependent in terms of where and when and whether they can actually do this type of recruiting and actually jump on this trend. But that's kind of the switch that we see happening in the industry.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the group? You can type into the text, into the chat, or unmute yourself and ask a question directly. So Braden Drake's asking, what methods do you use to incentivize customers to participate in your surveys or your data collection outside of giveaways?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question, and it's something that we struggle all the time. Is we typically don't offer a giveaway because it just create a different incentive for people to answer those surveys, and it actually raise questions in terms of the how valid those answers are. So I think a few thoughts there. One is we really think about the science of that. So basically doing A/B testing. So similar to product offerings, we think about how do we A/B test the different setup of the survey, because sometimes even you change the title, it will help boost some of the response rate. So you can actually think about how do you do A/B testing? Like what are the things you can tweak in terms of content, in terms of the way they approach, in terms of the channels, all those things can be A/B tested. And that will help provide some intelligence to see what is the best combination of parameters in the survey. The second thing that we notice is who sent the survey. The survey is best sent when you have a relationship, which means if you ask the RMs, the AEs, the account team to send the survey, that actually drives the most response rate. If the survey is sent from some random email box, that's probably generate like a lower response rate in all. So that's the second thought, is thinking about who actually sent the survey, what's the relationship with the customers. The third piece is there may be different benchmark or different behavior from different customer groups. So for example, what we've seen from our data sample is the response rate is very different across the different segments. Some of the segments have higher response rate. Some of the segments just by nature it has lower response rate. And you have historical data you can actually benchmark to say what is the ideal or the target response rate you want to achieve for each segment, and you can adjust accordingly. It's probably not fair to say, hey, there's one standard line to say, okay, every survey needs to get to this this benchmark or response rate. It varies by segment, it varies by different type of surveys, it's different by geographics. Like there are so many parameters that can change the results. So we'll just be careful of like set the right expectation in the beginning.
Great. So Daria is asking, what's your experience with push and pull data, combining employee survey results with backend data on behaviors and habits like Microsoft Workplace or network analysis?
Yeah, so that's actually a very good point. Is the survey itself does not tell the whole story. Right? The survey is a snapshot of people's position in one time, but also people are biased when they answer survey questions, and even you have a large enough sample, the results may still be skewed based on people's bias and perceptions and understanding of the questions, all those fun stuff. So it's definitely similar to what we do in customer research. We want to combine those qualitative survey to quantitative data. So how do we validate some of those understanding from qualitative survey using data is very interesting. And the thing that you mentioned about those passive data is actually, we also see a trend there, is the change of flow of work. So historically, when we think about the flow of work in terms of, for example, we use manager as example, we provide managers a lot of reports. Yeah, here are the reports, here are the data, make sense of it and use the data at your will. Right? That's the traditional approach of like, here's the data, here's the report, make use of it and take actions on it. Now with all the AI and passive personal data, there's a lot of much richer and AI technology that we can apply to facilitate that process and to actually suggest or recommend actions to employees and the managers. Right. So one feature in Microsoft Outlook we're using is Microsoft will actually remind you in the beginning of the day to say, hey, you have this meeting today, and here are the emails and the materials that actually relates to the meetings that you're going to have, without you actually digging into your email box or digging into your SharePoints. It's just right there. So it's much better to facilitate a lot of the processes, and at the same time, those data can be analyzed to validate some of the things you heard from surveys. So I think I know that in Microsoft we actually have a team, and at LinkedIn as well, we actually have a team who actually look at all the data from Outlook, from Team. Of course, it's GDPR compliant. We look at those data to see how, for example, we look at the data to see how our salespeople actually spend their time. How much time they actually spend with their customers, how much time they actually spend in internal meetings, how much time they actually spend in chatting with their cross-functional partners, right? So there are actually a lot of data they can immediately used and analyzed to validate or provide new insights into a lot of those employee data.
Okay, great, Kenny. How do you use personas? How does LinkedIn use personas or mapping in connection with the data that you've been talking about? Do you segment? Maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the things that you do there.
Yeah, so persona is the first, I would say the first thing that we do when we do customer journey map. So it's to understand who are we talking about here, right? Who is the audience that we're trying to focus on? So we look at customer personas. What are the typical personas we have in this situation? For example, when we look at the whole post-sale experience of our SaaS product, we look at what are the personas actually involved in this whole post-sale end-to-end experience, and we notice there are basically 3 or 4 key personas that are really relevant. One is decision maker, who actually make purchase decisions on some of the products, and then 2 is the key influencers. So people who are not making decisions but actually can influence the decision maker to a significant extent. The third group is the program owners, which are the people who are actually running the program, who owned like the owner of that particular program. And the four are the end users. So people are actually using the products.
Yeah.
So then when we identify those four personas, basically we need to understand what is the journey for each persona, because the journey that each persona experienced are totally different. If you think about the experience of a decision maker and experience of the end users, it's totally different. They're basically two different experiences you're trying to understand. So by understanding persona, it helps us to be focused and limiting the scope of when we map out the actual customer journey, that basically guide what is the scope, what is the journey we're trying to map out. So that's how we use persona in the first place. And then at the later stage, we also use persona to validate all the findings that we have in the customer journey map. So once you map out the journey, there's a validation process with the customers, basically say, hey, this is our understanding of your experience. Can you help validate or share more insights? And then those personas also help us to basically identify those people to do the validation. So that's where like how we use persona in the process.
Great, thanks. What's changed with LinkedIn Learning since the pandemic? What has accelerated in the last year or so?
Yeah, learning is definitely interesting areas. I think unsurprisingly, we see there is a spike in terms of learning hours and learning function as learning as a function. So definitely because of people are working from home, the number of hours people actually spend on learnings jump significantly. Then at the same time, learning as a function is getting more attention than ever. So we surveyed a lot of like learning and development professionals on this, and they actually share that probably the first time that learning start to gain the seat at the table of executives. And actually, we asked them the question of like, do you actually get championship from the CEO? The response there is, in the beginning of the COVID, 27% of L&D professionals say yes, they get a CEO championship. A year after, 62% of L&D professionals said they gain CEO championship. That's like almost 3 times more than a year ago. And then also from a budgeting perspective, we definitely see many of the organizations are increasing budget on L&D. Based on this based on the same survey, we noticed 33% of those professionals actually report their budget is going to increase. So that's definitely highlight the increasing importance and attention that companies put on learning and development. So that's one switch. The second trend we've seen is the switch from instructor-led training to virtual instructor-led training, which is pretty natural given all the remote working situation. So, but what's interesting is we notice the trend may just stay even after the whole pandemic, because companies start to see the benefits of virtual instructor-led training. It's cost effective. It's logistically easier to arrange. It have much bigger coverage. It provides much more flexibility. So there are actually benefits you can gain by moving some, or if not all, your instructor-led training into virtual setting. So there's definitely a trend moving there, and the trend may stay even after the pandemic. When we asked them, the LD professionals, about their budget allocation, 73% of those professionals actually expect to spend less on their instructor-led training. So that's where our assumption is this trend may stay over time. So that's another piece. The other thing I'll mention is about internal mobility. So the internal mobility is one of the top topics for learning within during the pandemic, and from the survey, more than half of the professionals actually report that internal mobility is more of a priority since the pandemic hits. So a lot of attention and efforts is being spent on internal mobilities, which kind of makes sense, right? Because it's more difficult and there's more control in terms of hiring externally. So basically, you need to fill a lot of those internal vacancies by looking internally versus looking outside. So we see a lot of pickup in internal hiring. Let me see what's the data here. We actually see that the internal hiring rates is almost 20% higher than the same time in 2019. So there's definitely more internal mobilities happening, and in terms of learning, like the organizations learn about how to actually facilitate this whole internal mobility trend. What is also interesting is, from research, we noticed that the employers that have better internal mobilities actually achieving better results. So employees that have internal mobilities, like work with a company that with internal mobility, stay twice as longer than the companies that they don't. And then for those employees, they also engage more, they learn more, and they are happier. So there's a direct correlation between like the ability to move internally to the actual engagement and longevity of that employee with that company. So that's another interesting fact I'd love to share.
That is really interesting. I think I don't know if Chris Debner is still on the call, but he's somebody that works a lot in global mobility. But that makes a lot of sense. What in terms of improving the experience? So once you've understood the experience that people are having, you've mapped that out, and you understand the key moments, et cetera. What have you seen in terms of being able to improve that sustainably? And what can you tell us a little bit about how you get different people who are involved in touching that journey involved in such a way that there really is measurable improvement? What are some key differences that you'd say make the success of that?
Okay. I think like I said, the first step is to understand what's the current situation is, right? That's what we use customer journey map for, is to understand, the personas, all the experience the customer going through, the pain points, the needs of those customers, and then what is the emotional journey of those customers during the process. So that's like all is about understanding the current state. And then we move into more of a design phase of thinking about what is the new experience would look like. Yeah. So the approach that we often take is more of a kind of blue sky approach. So we start with a blank of paper and really think about what is the ideal experience that we want our customers to have, without considering all the internal constraints, all the organizational structures, all the constraints here and there. So basically, without constraints, what is the ideal experience we want the customers want to have? Once we have that, then we layer on all the internal constraints that we may have. And then to think about what are the tweaks we have to make to accommodate some of the constraints that cannot be mitigated. Because if you look at internal constraints, there are ones that you can change, and there are ones that you cannot change in a short period of time. Right? So we really focus on the second part, the latter part, the ones that we cannot change quickly, takes a long time to change. and then we adjust the experience to those constraints. So that's the exercise we're going to do. What we found the most effective and efficient is to think about the operating model at the same time as the customer experience. Mm-hmm. Because the experience does not fall from the sky. The experience is supported by your internal operating model and basically your employee experience, right? What is the employee experience you want to have to support that customer experience? So that's why like you basically connecting the CX and EX together, because those are basically two sides of a coin. You want to make sure you actually provide that good customer employee experience so that they can support the customers. So I think that's where we found the most effective and efficient way is to do those two things at the same time. Thinking about what is the experience, the ideal experience the customer wants. Then we think about what is the internal processes and organizational structures and operating models that can support this ideal customer experience. If you do those two things at the same time, you have the biggest flexibility to adjust both. And then you make them the two clicks together.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I would suggest, but not every time you can do that. A lot of time the customer experience design is separate from operating model design, but we see the most benefits when they do it together. When the question of how do we make sure everyone is on board, how do we make sure that things can be successful? A few thoughts. One is experience design is always a complicated, cross-functional, and long-term efforts. I would say usually it takes like over a year to even improve and stabilize a new experience. So that really require leadership, support, and commitment. And that is like a must-have. You can't have people always challenging you, like, show me the results. What's the improvements after a month? What's the improvements after 2 months? You can't do that because it's a long-term effort. It's a long-term investment. It's a long-term commitment. So it is very much required you have leadership buy-in and leadership long-term support on this. The second thing is cross-functional nature of the effort. So it is never going to work if you're only trying to solve this within the four walls of one function. You have to bring people together. What you can choose is where to start. You can start with the simple journey, which have fewer functions involved. But it's always have to be a cross-functional effort. So secure the commitment and support from our cross-functional partner is another critical piece there. The third thing is the idea of like design thinking agile, right? So customer needs changes all the time. And even when we do customer research, we cannot guarantee that we have 100% accurate understanding of our customer. And no matter how well your design is, there's always place that you never thought of or needs to be improved. And that's what we learned from our, like the example I shared before, the new service model. When the tire hits the roads, there are so many things that we need to rethink our hypothesis. We need to redesign, we need to readjust, right? So the concept of quick test and learn is really important in experience design. And that's where you need the executive, the leadership commitment and support in order to do that, right? So really to learn, to test, and to adjust the hypothesis and design that you have. And then the last piece on this is, in order to do that quick learn and test and learn, you have to have a robust measuring system. So the measuring system is, there are different ways of thinking about it, right? There's a lagging indicator, there's leading indicators, there's activity-based, there's like financial-based, whatever. Like there are so many things that you can consider. But the point is, you have to have some type of measurement that can quickly show the impact of your improvements. so that you can have that feedback channel from the customer to see whether that works. How well does that work? Can we improve? If we make this tweak, would that change how the customer perceive us? How customer will change the behavior? Like, you have to have that measurement in order to do that quick test and learn. And you also need that measurement to showcase to the leadership that this is actually making impact. Right. So those are the few elements I think are really critical to be successful in terms of designing the experience.
Great. Thank you so much. Really great words of advice there. Thank you so much, Kenny. Really appreciate your time today and for sharing your experiences. And when Kenny and I talked about this, we decided to make this more of almost a personal conversation about what you've learned. So I appreciate the personal insights and the personal nature of this. It's really been valuable. Thanks everybody who's joined us for this session, and those of you who have been with us for multiple sessions today. We'll be doing our next summit on June 22nd. So similar Tuesday format to this. So save the date, June 22nd. We'll be letting you know about speakers for that very soon. Thanks again to Kenny, and thanks for everybody for joining us today, and best wishes to all. Stay safe and well.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you.